Hey everyone, this is the Hot Revenge community. Ready to hear a new intense story? Then get comfortable, because we're starting. It was 11 p.m. when my phone lit up with a message. It was a group thread started by my dad. The message stated that an agreement had been reached. Dustin and Chloe would officially move into the family home. He suggested that I should finally relax. My mother quickly responded with a small red heart emoji. The air in the room immediately felt suffocating. I began reviewing my bank statements as though they were a detailed ledger. Expenses for taxes, roof repairs, utilities, all the silent funds that kept everything functioning. As I read line after line, the truth hit me hard. In this family structure, I was no longer a daughter. I was merely an account they had chosen to close. Have you ever been completely abandoned by the very people you constantly supported? Tell me where you are reading this from. I want to know how far this account travels. I didn't shed a tear. I didn't question their decision. I simply opened my laptop. The cold, precise light of the screen was perfect for the task ahead. I canceled the mortgage auto-pay, canceled the property insurance, and shut down the electric and water payment plans. Each click felt like severing a tight, restricting cable I had lived with for years. By midnight, their essential support structure had vanished. My anger wasn't loud or explosive this time. It was sharp and meticulous, like balancing a financial spreadsheet. Every single expense was now a painful realization. I had been the silent primary investor in their vision of family. Tonight, I was getting out. Once the final confirmation email pinged into my inbox, I leaned back and observed my empty apartment. It smelled of lukewarm coffee and unfinished paint projects. My heart felt fragile, like glass, but finally it was clear and transparent. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the blinds I hadn't yet hung. I quickly packed a large duffel bag with necessities, my laptop, passport, 3 clean shirts, and a resilient houseplant that had somehow survived all my moves. I loaded everything into the car. The drive into the city was eerily quiet. They hadn't called yet. Maybe they were still asleep in the house I had made sure remained warm. Perhaps they were about to wake and learn exactly how that warmth had been sustained. The new apartment was modest, a small one-bedroom unit with high ceilings. It was quiet enough that I could clearly hear myself think. I placed the plant by the window and watched the light reflect softly on the hardwood floor. It wasn't home yet, but it was definitively mine. My friend Maya appeared unexpectedly that afternoon, bringing an equal mix of coffee and sharp wit. "You look like someone who just pulled off a major heist," she observed. "Maybe I did," I replied, but the only thing I stole back was myself. She laughed, then her expression turned serious as she studied me. "Are you really okay?" "I'm not destroyed," I stated. "I'm simply restructuring the books." We settled onto the floor, surrounded by stacked moving boxes. My hands trembled slightly as I took the coffee cup. The sting of betrayal was still there, but beneath it was a sharper sensation, clarity. I always believed loyalty was the ultimate virtue, I told her. It turns out that only holds true when loyalty is mutual. Maya nodded slowly. "So what's next?" "I rebuild," I responded, starting from zero. No outstanding debts, no invisible obligations, just a solid structure that can actually stand on its own. She offered a slow, proud smile. "You were always much better at architecture than managing emotions." "Yeah," I half smiled back. "But maybe this time I'll manage to design both correctly, right?" The day faded into peaceful silence. I unpacked a single box and found my framed degree, the proof of the years I spent trying to justify myself. Every object I set down was a quiet declaration. I no longer owe them anything. Outside, the city hummed its existence, anonymous, indifferent, and honest. I stood by the window, coffee cooling in hand, watching the light change. For the first time in many years, nobody relied on me, and that profound silence felt like peace. I used to believe that love was built like a physical house, layered, patient, and completely secure if you only kept fixing the flaws. But looking back, all I see now is the scaffolding I alone erected. After moving into my place, the nights felt distinctly different. Silence can be far louder than any argument. Every creak in the floor sounded like the past demanding payment. I often opened my laptop, reviewing the records of what I had paid for. The new roof, the entire heating system, the water utility bills, all stacked like indisputable proof of my dedication. My father used to say, "You're the dependable one, Diana. I can always count on you." I thought it was a compliment. Now I understand it was merely permission to drain me, completely dry. Dustin would frequently visit, never contributing, always full of elaborate excuses. Every investment he pursued fell apart faster than the last. An application that never launched, a mobile food truck venture that never left the driveway, a cryptocurrency scheme that ended with tears, and a new loan taken out in my name. Yet my dad still called him a visionary. When I repaired a burst pipe at 2 a.m., no one even noticed. When Dustin purchased a brand new expensive smartwatch, they celebrated his success as if he had miraculously solved poverty. The memory that truly causes pain isn't a loud confrontation, it's a soft whisper. My mother, leaning over the kitchen sink after dinner, murmuring, "You are so strong, honey. Not everyone is meant to shine brightly. Some of us are here to hold everything together." I accepted that back then, proud to be the binding agent. I never realized that glue eventually gets completely used up. Years passed like that. My income funneled directly into maintaining their reality. I was the solid foundation beneath their consistently collapsing walls. I convinced myself that this was the true meaning of family. It wasn't about affection, it was just plain logistics. There is a specific type of exhaustion that simply doesn't disappear with sleep. It settles into your bones like curing concrete. You start to confuse sheer survival with moral virtue, and exhaustion becomes evidence that you truly matter. This is the unseen burden of the devoted caretaker. It's how people convinced to care for others start believing that suffering is their true purpose. I wore that burden like a heavy chain for so long it began to feel like precious jewelry. Every single sacrifice seemed noble until the evening they tossed me aside. Now, when I recall that night, I can almost appreciate the painful symmetry. After years of supporting them, they freed me by completely erasing my existence. I didn't lose my family. I simply closed a financial account that had been catastrophically overdrawn for far too long. Sometimes I scroll through old photographs. The family stood proudly in front of the house. Dad smiled broadly. Dustin pretended to help paint. The porch. My mother clutched her necklace, acting as if she had personally constructed the walls. I used to see genuine love in that scene. Now I only see a costly project I financed entirely without ever being allowed to sign the foundational blueprints. It's strange how overwhelming clarity feels like fresh oxygen after you've existed solely on smoke. I am not angry anymore. I just finally grasped the situation. They never intentionally tried to ruin me. They just confidently assumed I would never leave because I had always stayed. I always paid. I always fixed things. Not anymore. The house still stands because I built it, but it no longer belongs to me. And that is the pivotal lesson I finally understood. A week later, my phone flashed with alerts I didn't want. Chloe's face filled my screen, filtered perfectly, her hand resting on the banister I had personally installed. The caption read, "Our dream home." My thumb froze mid-scroll. She wrote it as if I had never been part of anything. The post had already received hundreds of likes, friends, distant neighbors, people who had no idea of the reality behind those polished emojis. Dustin's comment appeared directly beneath hers. Finally ours. I immediately closed the app before tossing the phone, but the silence that followed was not peace. It was humiliation rapidly sharpening into razor-edge precision. I drafted an email, polite, extremely cautious, and factual. Please confirm immediate repayment of the full renovation balance within 30 days. I attached every single receipt, even including a thank you at the end. It felt utterly ridiculous, like apologizing for bleeding out. A few hours later, Dustin responded, "You're completely overreacting, Diana. This is family, not a financial business deal. Don't try to create drama here." I stared intently at those words. Family, not business. That exact phrase had been their device for trapping me over the years, their effective parlor trick, converting accountability into debilitating guilt. Then my father's post appeared on social media. Some people forget exactly who raised them. My mother commented beneath it with a praying hands emoji. I didn't cry this time. I didn't even bother to call them. I simply observed the predictable pattern unfold, like reading a blueprint I had memorized long ago. That night must stop by. She dropped her purse on my kitchen counter and immediately poured herself a cup of tea, acting completely at home. "Did you happen to see the post?" she asked. I just nodded. "Do you want me to write a brutal comment under it?" "No," I replied. "Let them talk all they want." She paused, studying my unnaturally calm demeanor. "You are too relaxed." "I am finished negotiating with ghosts," I explained. "The next time they require my attention, they can expect to read a formal legal notice." Mia raised an eyebrow skeptically. "You are serious about this?" I met her gaze directly. "I'm done trying to play fair." She smiled approvingly. "Good. Maybe it's time they actually pay for the structure you built." After she left, I immediately opened my laptop once more. There were no tears now, no hesitation, just raw data, concrete evidence, and precise timestamps. I gathered every single document, every email thread, every financial transfer I had ever made on their behalf. My fingers moved swiftly, finally possessing a genuine purpose. As I meticulously scrolled through folders labeled repairs and utilities, a new realization dawned. This wasn't about retribution, it was about restoration. They had meticulously constructed a house of mirrors, shiny, fundamentally misleading, full of self-serving reflections that made them appear righteous. But mirrors cannot support actual weight. They inevitably shatter under pressure, and I was absolutely done being their reflection. So I pressed the print button. The sound of the printer working was steady, methodical, and almost soothing. When the final page emerged, I stacked the accumulated evidence neatly and sealed the entire package in a large envelope. Tomorrow, they would receive my final gift, an itemized invoice written entirely in cold, hard truth. The following morning, the atmosphere carried the sterile coldness that invariably follows a firm decision. I carried the envelope downtown to Evelyn's office. It was a glass-walled cube that smelled distinctly of ink, coffee, and calm professional destruction. Evelyn did not waste a single word. "So, you are prepared to formalize the separation?" "Ready," I confirmed. My voice sounded firm, like a final judgment. We sat opposite her desk while she reviewed the digital files I had compiled. Her pen moved quickly. Crisp clicking sounds echoed lightly in the silent room. "We will issue a formal written notice demanding repayment," she stated. "We keep the language factual, emotionally detached, and perfectly clear." "That is exactly my language," I agreed. By the time the final draft was completed, it read with the precision of a surgical scalpel. 30 days to repay the documented $400,000 in incurred expenses. Failure to promptly respond would result in immediate legal escalation. No accusations, no anger, only precision. When the email was sent, I felt something profoundly release in my chest. It wasn't simple relief, it was perfect alignment. I was no longer the one responsible for solving problems. I was the reckoning itself. 2 days later, Chloe responded, using her firm's official letterhead. I instantly recognized it. The tone was far too dramatic and performative to be anyone else's. "Our client denies all presented claims. Any materials used were explicitly gifted. Furthermore, Diana Jennings is currently under investigation for unauthorized use of proprietary design templates." I read the text twice, very slowly. She had masterfully flipped the narrative, instantly turning their fraud into an attack on me. It was almost impressive in its sheer arrogance. I forwarded the entire document to Evelyn. "Classic deflection," she responded immediately. "She is attempting to make you doubt the solid ground you are standing on." That feeling was very familiar. It was the family's preferred trick. Evelyn looked at me curiously. I briefly explained the pattern, describing how any expression of love had always arrived bundled with financial debt, how loyalty had always functioned as a leash, cleverly disguised as virtue. She nodded slowly, then leaned back fully in her chair. "They genuinely believe it's love, Diana," she said softly. "It is control that is the fundamental trap of normalized cruelty. It hides, conveniently hidden behind terms like duty and tradition. You were meticulously trained to always keep them safe. Now, you are learning the necessary skill of keeping yourself safe." Her words hit harder than any legal threat ever could. For years, I had terribly confused their blatant exploitation for true affection and their resulting silence for peace. I truly believed that being the dependable child made me inherently valuable. I didn't realize it simply made me consistently convenient. I walked the long way home through the light rain, city lights flickering and reflecting across the wet pavement. Every raindrop sounded like a perfect punctuation mark to a harsh truth I had willfully ignored for too long. That night, I sat by my window and made a new list, not of financial payments, but of harmful behavioral patterns, things I had blindly forgiven, clear boundaries I had completely erased, and apologies I had felt compelled to make simply for existing. By the time I finished, the page looked exactly like pivotal evidence in a complex case I was finally starting to win. I folded the list carefully into my notebook, feeling as though it were a solemn contract signed between the person I used to be and the person I was actively becoming. Chloe's accusation did not scare me in the slightest. It clearly defined the battleground. She had chosen elaborate manipulation. I had chosen mathematics, and math is incapable of lying. Tomorrow, I would begin the complex process of tracing every single transaction they had ever been involved in. If this was going to escalate into a full war, I would fight it with extreme precision, devoid of emotion. This was no longer just family drama. It was crucial data. It was undeniable structure. It was the sound of distinct lines finally being drawn irrevocably and straight. 2 weeks later, Evelyn called. Her voice sounded tight, the way lawyers speak before delivering bad news. "Diana, we found something," she said. "You need to sit down right now." I did not sit. I stood by the window, watching the rain streak the glass like data lines. "Tell me what it is." "There is a major loan under your name," she said. "A $500,000 green housing expansion. It was signed using your architectural seal." For a second, everything went thin. Only her precise, terrible voice remained. "My seal." I repeated. "Yes," she confirmed. "It's on every document." I looked at my desk. The real seal sat there, cold metal catching the light. I realized this was not an accident. It was deliberate fraud. By nightfall, I was driving toward Willow Creek. The house looked foreign in the storm. Scaffolding covered the front. Lumber piles sat in the driveway. When I walked in, the air smelled like wet paint and crime. 2 men in suits stood by the dining table. Blueprints were spread out. They were my designs. Chloe turned, still smiling. "Diana," she said too cheerfully. "Perfect timing. What is happening?" I asked. She pointed at the plans. "Investors are expanding the property. You should be proud. It's your work." "My signatures are fake," I said. She shrugged slightly. "You always wanted the credit. Now you have it." The men looked at each other. One cleared his throat. "Is there an issue?" "Yes," I stated. "There are many issues." I took out my phone and hit record. Chloe's smile didn't break. She leaned in close. "You think recording scares me? You built your life fixing messes. Go ahead and fix this one too." Her perfume was sharp. Expensive confidence. I looked at her and felt only clarity. When I left, the rain had stopped. Streetlights reflected in puddles like open eyes. My phone held the evidence. My heart felt light, but not happily, like a rope that had just snapped. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking one thing. All my life, I confused obligation with love. I thought being needed meant being important. It was always leverage, not love. I opened a new folder on my desk, containing the forged blueprint. I uploaded the recordings, the documents, the photos. I watched their lives take shape, line by line. The house they loved had become a crime scene, the place where their desire for easy money finally destroyed them. I was the witness this time, not the savior. The next day had that quiet tension before a major event. By noon, Evelyn called again. "They are moving fast," she said. "The bank is working with investigators. They used your signature for the second mortgage. Agents are going to the house tonight." I didn't answer. I was already driving back to Willow Creek. When I turned onto the street, the house looked smaller, damaged by truth. 2 government cars idled outside. Men in gray jackets stood under the porch light, holding documents. My dad stood in the doorway, pale and confused. Dustin paced behind him, phone shaking, voice cracking. "They say we are under investigation." "Why?" An investigator opened a file. "Forged documents. Fraudulent loans. We need to talk to Chloe Cole." My mom was frozen in the hallway, holding the banister tight. "She's not here," my dad mumbled, trembling. I stayed hidden by the fence. I didn't interfere. I wanted to see them face the trouble they created. A minute later, Chloe's car drove up, headlights cutting through the drizzle. She parked across the street, unaware. I stepped out. Chloe! Her head snapped up. She froze when she saw me. The calm look finally vanished. What is all this, Diana? She asked sharply. You tell me, I said, my voice steady. The fake mortgage, the stolen money, my license on your forms. Her jaw tightened. You don't know anything. I know enough, I replied quietly. You used my family to fund your scam. You played them in me. The game is finished. Her eyes flicked toward the porch, where agents were stepping out. The panic lasted a second, then she sneered. They trusted me. That's their fault. I recorded her final words. Agents surrounded her car immediately. She didn't fight. She was silent. She just folded her arms and watched the world she built fall apart. Dustin ran out, shocked. She's lying. Tell them she's lying, he yelled at my dad. But my dad was silent. The papers in his hand shook like a confession. My mom held the doorway, whispering prayers that sounded like apologies. When the cars drove away, the house was silent. Only the rain made noise. A soft, desperate knock came to my door that night. I opened it to find my dad soaked in the rain. His voice was raw. We're losing everything, Diana. The bank is calling in the loan. Please, you have to help us. I stood still. I slid a folder across the table to him. It held my statement, the evidence, the confession, proof that I was innocent. I did help, I said calmly. I told the truth. He stared at me, mouth open, as I closed the door. Outside, the rain poured harder, cleaning the street. For the first time, I didn't feel responsible for fixing their mess. I felt free. 6 months later, my new office smelled like wood and paper. The walls were still bare, honest, waiting for new work. On the table were blueprints stamped with my studio name, Haven Collab, a nonprofit for women rebuilding after financial or family damage. Maya sat across from me, tapping her mug. You realized you built exactly what you needed back then, she said. I smiled. Yes, I built the thing I couldn't find.